Welcome back, everybody. Pleasure to be back with you today with two special guests. We have Vicki G, my counterpart, elected official for the West Boundary, as well as Rachael Roussin, who is the, what's your title, Rachael, for the Kootenay Boundary Farm Advisors?
Coordinator.
The coordinator, the one who makes everything happen. We'll put it that way. Food security has been clearly identified as something that is important to us in the boundary, and it's come up again and again in the conversations we've had, as well as some of the news around the province and around the country. We recognize some challenges to our food systems, and so we brought these two special guests in today to speak to some of the elements around food security. Rachael, particularly around the production end of the spectrum, and Vicki particularly around what's going on with some of the access and vulnerable populations piece particularly. Brian sends his regrets today. He's unable to make it given a last minute change of schedule. So we're excited to know that our farmers market is going to open up in Grand Forks tomorrow. So that's a big day. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Rachael.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today on this public forum to talk about something dear to all of our hearts, food security. And, you know, more than ever, our regional food systems are highlighted through this pandemic and how important they are to sustain us during times of vulnerability. And, you know, there's quite a few foodies who live in Grand Forks, and I think this is resonating, this crisis, with a lot of people saying, yeah, we need to support these more regional food systems so that we're not as vulnerable in times of crisis. Grand Forks is fortunate in the sense that you have an incredible agricultural sector there who is working hard to grow food and to support residents and businesses alike. So my role with the Kootenay Boundary Farm Advisors is we provide agricultural extension services to the agriculture sector. This mostly relates to technical production things like soil and water management, as an example. And we have been reaching out to farmers in the Boundary region. And we actually work with farmers all the way from Rock Creek to Fernie to Golden. So our area is very vast. Some areas that we also work very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture. And I think, I know that in Grand Forks, you have quite a few seasonal workers who come into town. And the Ministry of Agriculture has been working really hard to make sure that any foreign workers that come into Grand Forks or into British Columbia are going to be going through a very rigid quarantine process. The Ministry of Agriculture and the province are overseeing that really, really closely. So rest assured that the ministry sees the value and the need for the agriculture sector to have those workers, and they're doing that in the safest way possible, and also to protect those foreign workers while they're here. So, you know, labor has been a concern for businesses, but I think in terms of the foreign workers, maybe there'll be a slight decrease, but hopefully all the farms can get those workers that they need. On the smaller farm scale, one thing that I'm hearing from farmers in balancing COVID as they're trying to respond by increasing their production for this season. And this is a real balancing act for those local farmers because they hear the need, the desire for local food. So they're trying to increase their production, but they're also not trying to be too crazy because they only have their own capacity, but they're working really hard to grow what they can to provide for their communities. And their markets are also disrupted. So a lot of farmers, the smaller farmers in Grand Forks, do rely on the Grand Forks Farmers Market for sales, but there's a lot of anxiety about how much product they'll actually be able to move through that market, because there's going to be a limited amount of people in the market for everybody's safety. And that means that sales are going to be held up or slower. And so although farmers are trying to increase their production, they're also trying to anticipate how much they'll actually be able to sell through the farmers market. Also, some of those COVID precautionary measures are creating a little extra labor and time for those farmers. So when we think about labor and the help that farmers need right now, some farms might be actually needing to hire extra people to help with those extra steps, such as extra packaging, extra sanitation measures, and all these things that we need to keep everybody safe. So I know that farmers are just trying to meet all of these unexpected circumstances as best as they can. And some farmers have moved to online platforms like Boundary Hill. They are pushing a lot of product online. Little Fork Ranch in Greenwood, they've opened an online store. Jersey Land Organics, they're supplying local food. And also the Kettle Valley Food Co-op, their online store is booming. So they've increased sales about 120% to help distribute local product to local residents. And they have been providing free delivery with a volunteer workforce. And this system has worked really well for some farms so far. So for example, Settle Down Farm has been able to sell a lot of their greens early season through the Kettle Valley Food Co-op. So if people are looking to access local food, they can look to the Kettle Valley Food Co-op as their source for online ordering and distribution of that local food. And the next thing that I wanted to mention, just sort of like a feel-good story, and hopefully this dry spell doesn't last too long into the summer, but in this kind of will for some farms to at least increase their production or at least get started on the season, it has been a nice dry start for the year. So farmers have been able to get into their fields and have a pretty fair weather start. So I don't want to put words into farmers' mouths, but I think it's been a good way to take action and be able to start farming when they can see this increased demand. Vicki, and the next part I want to talk about just is that meat producers are also really responding to the COVID pandemic, and their phones have been ringing off the hook, and meat producers have also been responding with open arms and trying to sell their product through various markets, whether that's at Jersey Land Organics or the Kettle Valley Food Co-op or these various other small farms like Boundary Hill and Little Fork Ranch, to try to get more product to customers. And they're responding also by just trying to up their production for this season. Vicki G has been working really hard with the Boundary meat producers to try to expand the capacity of Magnum Meats, the abattoir in Rock Creek, so that we can ensure that we have the processing capacity to increase production through these times and also into the future, because we know how important abattoirs are to our local meat supply. I've been babbling for a while. I'm gonna let Vicki G chat for a while, and then maybe there's a way we can have like a group discussion about anything that you may have missed or anything like that. But before I leave, I hope to see you all at the Grand Forks Farmers Market tomorrow. I think we need to be there for our farmers who are trying to be there for us. So thank you.
So I'll start by saying that I've been part of an ad hoc food security system or network meeting since 2015. Ironically, it started just days after the fire in Rock Creek. The organization of this group meeting came from Tammy Battersby from Blessings Boutique in Grand Forks. So we have been meeting quarterly, and there have been people from across both east and west boundary. And after COVID happened, we started meeting weekly. And we also have more people attending the group, and we have somebody from Big White as well. So we're a very large geographic area, and emergency food supply is being handled by quite a variety of organizations across the boundary. We have a formal food bank out of Grand Forks, Boundary Food Bank, which serves all the way to probably as far as Westbridge and Sidley. People from Beaverdale and Big White are going to Kelowna Food Bank for formal food bank services. And then we have services done by volunteers and nonprofits in Beaverdale, Rock Creek, Westbridge, Greenwood, and then I know there are several in Grand Forks as well. So it's been really interesting having those group meetings and seeing what people are experiencing during this time. A few concerns have come up. One is that there has been a shortage of meat. Not a surprise that there's been a shortage, well, nationwide, probably continent-wide. because of food processing issues in relation to COVID. Another good reason to have a local food system and have more control. And bigger is not always better when it comes to our food processing. So that is one positive thing that has come out of this. Other things that people are seeing is that there's been quite a strain on volunteer resources, and people for years now have been traveling, delivering food to people and communities on their own dime. So there's been talk about trying to see what we can do to provide more funding to those groups. One of the things that's become painfully evident is that although we are meeting together and sharing stories of what's going on, we really haven't kind of moved to the position of being able to act together in a cohesive fashion. So I'm feeling very personally frustrated, I guess, that there are opportunities out there for funding, but we really don't really know how to go after it as a group. And I would add that there is a feeling that we should be doing this regionally, as opposed to a community here and a community there kind of thing. Interesting that there's been mixed findings or reports back from people at the ground level. In some cases, there have been more people coming for food, and in some cases, there's actually been less. And there's been some speculation that, because of the additional funding that's come, for example, to people on disability, the increased GST, that people are actually able to go out and buy their own food like the rest of us when they have the money to be able to do so and not depend on emergency food supplies. I feel like there's a lesson there. So getting back again to the need for collaboration, we've got quite a lot of activity now of different communities trying to develop community gardens. I'm getting a number of requests for grant and aid. I would really like to see if we can access funds from outside our area at this time. I think it's really important because when the situation returns to normal, I think we're going to be hard pressed to be able to sustain things with our own local resources. Thank you.
Thank you. And with an eye to the time, I think we'll probably wrap it up. Thank you for both of you for joining us today. And I think it's a good insight into how much is going on behind the scenes in all these different pieces of this very complex puzzle that we're in at the time. And I think both Rachel and Vicki mentioned or alluded to the fact that realistically, this is now a time more than ever when we see value in our strong local food system, both for production and access. And so encourage you all to figure out a way to make sure you can support that local production system however you can. And we look forward to seeing everybody next week. So thanks again to both of you.